This week on Quadriga, refugees in Germany, Angst on both sides. Europe is being confronted by record numbers of refugees. Germany takes on more asylum seekers than any other country in Europe. In 2013 alone, over 100,000 applications for asylum were filed in Germany. But not everyone is ready to welcome refugees with open arms. This building in Tröglitz in eastern Germany was recently firebombed in what authorities suspect was an attempt to prevent 40 refugees from moving in. Police say violence against refugee homes like this is on the rise, and that's sending people like these protesters onto the street. They want refugees to know they are still welcome in Germany. What does German society need to do to prevent future attacks? Your host this week, Peter Craven.
Yes, hello and a very warm welcome to this latest edition of Quadriga, coming to you from the German capital, Berlin. And this time round the focus is very much on the situation of asylum seekers and refugees here in Germany. Of course, in light of that shocking attack in the small German town of Tröglitz over the weekend on a planned shelter for asylum seekers. Now, to talk about all these issues, I'm joined here in the studio by three excellent commentators. And without any further ado, I would like to introduce them to you, beginning with Mekonnen Mesghena. Born in Eritrea, he's made Germany his second home. Mekonnen is a freelance journalist working in Germany and internationally for a range of media outlets. He's also a political analyst at the Berlin-based Heinrich Böll Foundation, focusing on migration and diversity. We're also joined by Christian Jakob, who has been working for the Berlin-based daily The Tats for a decade now, specialising on issues like migration, social movements and development. He's also co-authored a book on Fortress Europe, closing its doors to refugees. And a very familiar face here on Quadriga, Judy Dempsey, currently a writer and analyst for the Carnegie Foundation. Judy has worked for a host of international broadcasters in a long and distinguished career. Thank you very much, all three, for joining me today. And I'd like to begin with you, Christian, because I've mentioned already, we saw it in our short report at the beginning, this fire, this arson attack, as it apparently is in the small town of Tröglitz in eastern Germany. It's a great cause for concern. It's made the international headlines. You have been to Tröglitz, and I'd like to ask you to describe Tröglitz for us so that we've got an idea of what kind of place this is that we're talking about.
Actually, Tröglitz is a typical East German village. It's very small in the southernmost tip of the federal state of Sachsen-Anhalt, about half an hour south of Leipzig, and it has lost about 25% of its population in the last 7 years, which is also typical for rural areas in the east of Germany. Until now, Tröglitz has not received any refugees, despite of the high amount of refugees coming into Germany. But then the regional government decided to send a small amount of refugees, 40 were supposed to go to Tröglitz and live there during their asylum case was checked by the authorities. And since December, an initiative of local citizens started to protest against this. And at the beginning, it was only citizens of the village, but after a few weeks, members and activists of the neo-Nazi party NPD joined the protests and mingled with the locals to protest against the refugees that were supposed to come. And this protest escalated so far that they were even threatening the mayor of Tröglitz. And after a few weeks, he resigned. Yep. He decided to not be mayor anymore because he said that the German government, is not able to protect him. And that was the point when Tröglitz for the first time came into national news. Everybody was curious what is happening there. How is it possible that, that these people were able to threaten a representative of the state for doing something that is like completely consensual, to an extent that he says, I can't do my job anymore. And while this discussion was going on in the last weeks, the attack on the shelter took place last Friday.
What details can you give us, just because, I'm using you as a reporter here because you've actually been there, just what details can you give us about this arson attack as it appears to be?
Yeah, it's not known yet who actually did it. There's nothing like nobody claimed to have done it yet. The police said that they were doing investigations into all directions, not only in the radical right-wing milieu, but it's very likely that some way or the other, it's the ones who committed it are part of extremist group. Mm-hmm. It would not be the first time. There has been a huge increase of attacks like this on refugee shelters, on refugees, particularly in East Germany, in rural areas of East Germany. And in most cases, the police is not able to investigate who did it. And the difference this time was that only a few hours after it happened, the public attention grew very, very quickly. The head of the federal state of Sachsen-Anhalt, Rainer Haseloff, did a press conference, which is very unlikely. Normally it's only the president of the police who's doing it. On the same afternoon, he, together with the Minister for Interior Affairs of Sachsen-Anhalt, came personally to Tröglitz to join the demonstration of citizens of the village. Mm-hmm. And, well, that's something new.
Mm-hmm. Mekonnen, I'd like to ask you for your impressions about all this, because it's an unbelievable story. The mayor is forced to step down. There's been a death threat against another official. What do you make of it all?
Well, I would like to state at the beginning just two simple observations. One is that Tröglitz is a symptom of a long tradition and an ugly tradition of hatred and brutality against refugees and minorities in this country. The second thing is Tröglitz is everywhere. Only this year, only the first quarter of this year, the last 3 months, we had over 20 attacks against refugees and refugee homes. Yeah. So we see here, it's not a single issue in Tröglitz, but it is within a long tradition, starts back in the 90s, but also during the 2014, last year, when we had a growing number of refugees. It's very true that Germany has been receiving the biggest number of refugees in Europe. But at the same time, the awareness is growing, also empathy is growing, but also racism and hatred is a kind of en vogue this time, and there is a European...
a kind of en vogue, you say it's like a fashion, it's something...
Yes, it's a fashion. I mean, you can see in many European countries, look into France, look Denmark, look UK, you have a growing sentiment of fear-mongering and hate-mongering against refugees and minorities. And then in Germany, you have a growing, not only those disadvantaged, not only those less educated, but you have also a middle class growing potential who has been campaigning against refugees and minorities, and of course within the framework of anti-Islamic campaign, etc. So there's a lot of package into that, but refugees are part of that fear and hate mongering as well.
You've given us an awful lot to talk about, you two gentlemen, first of all. Judy, I'd like to turn to you. Heiko Maas, the German Justice Minister, has reflected what you were just saying, that he said Tröglitz is the tip of the iceberg. What is the iceberg, if this is the tip of the iceberg?
Well, the iceberg is a very, very solid piece of unspoken narrative. And it's about Germany trying to come to terms with being a country of migration. It's about Germany trying to come to terms with the fact that it has to keep its doors open. And I think above all, it's about Germany, particularly Germany is the biggest of the European Union countries and the strongest economy, coming to terms with the extraordinary complexities of globalization and the crises now that that particularly Germany and other governments in the EU are facing across the Middle East, across even the Caucasus, across parts of Africa. And it's these crises which are coming up against this iceberg, which before was more or less stable, despite what you say, it was more or less stable. But now comes the crunch time on how Germany is going to deal with this problem.
And when Germany tries to tackle, when Germany wrestles with the kind of issues that you've both been talking about, is the situation in Germany, because you were mentioning Denmark, France and other UK, other countries, is that process of tackling these problems different in Germany because of Germany's history than it is in the other countries?
I actually think, I was thinking of this quite a lot over the past couple of days. I think it is actually quite remarkable how Chancellor Angela Merkel and the German government has stepped in from very early on against Islamophobia, against hate against the Muslim communities, against anti-Semitism, against anybody who's against keeping Germany a place of welcome. It is remarkable, and I don't think Merkel is doing this for reasons, oh, it's my duty. I think she actually believes in it. And she has tried to prevent her own party, her Conservative Party, it's in coalition with the Social Democrats, but she's tried to prevent her government from verging or pandering to populist parties such as the AfD. And I mean, I think
the
this
alternative for Germany, the
Deutschland,
AfD, yeah,
yes.
okay.
And this actually, I think this singles her out compared to how the British government deals with immigrants and refugees, and indeed other countries across Europe. Hats off actually to this government for taking a stance from the beginning.
Okay, some praise.
Well, yeah, I totally agree that I think Angela Merkel, as the first chancellor who gave the issue of immigration, the issue of integration, one of her priority attention. It's very remarkable. On the other side, there is some unique situation in Germany, and it is the narrative. You know, this country, it has been always told that Germany hasn't been an immigration country. It's an ethnic nation. You know, being German is always something, you know, attached to ethnicity, to whiteness, etc., etc. So Germany has a difficulty in defining itself as a republic, you know, as a modern republic state with people coming, immigrating, and, you know, being part of the citizenship of this country. So this notion of citizenship based on republic is still very difficult in the narrative of Germany.
It's an evolving process.
Exactly.
I wonder about that, actually. I mean, it's interesting to hear your perspective. I think Germany has changed over this idea of migration, actually. This was a furious debate in 1992, 1993. The Social Democrats wanted to actually get rid of this German citizenship, nationhood idea through blood. Your mother or your grandmother had to have German blood or whatever. I mean, I think the debate has changed for many reasons. I think Germany has become more open through globalization, but secondly, Germany needs immigrants for demographic reasons. And it is true, quite frankly, it is hugely, still largely white society, but the integration element is now top of the agenda. The need to reach out to the second, third and fourth generations of young Turks, the need to make the Muslims literally feel welcome through the toleration of mosques and building it. I think Germany is making that transition from in denial about the need for immigrants to the necessity for them.
Okay, so that's good news about Germany, yeah. But I want to come back to the point that Mekonnen made, that talking about the problem at hand with Tröglitz, yeah, and the broader problem behind that, because you mentioned the statistics, you mentioned that these attacks are on the rise. I've got the figures, yeah. In 2012, there were 24 attacks on asylum shelters around Germany. 2013, that figure was up to 58. 2014, until the beginning of the week, the figure was 150, but suddenly it went up to 160 that apparently the authorities, 162, had registered for last year. It's on the rise, yeah? Why is it on the rise? Is it simply because more and more refugees are coming to Germany, as you appeared to indicate, or is it more complex than that? Christian.
Well, I would say that it has been clear that this was going to happen. The question was only how quick was it going to rise. It's true that the large...
Why was it clear that it was going to happen?
The experiences of the 1990s, when the number of asylum seekers was at a similar level as it is now, are still there. Many of the political structures did not change. It is true that the German society has modernized a lot. And many people are aware of that there is no innocence, so to say, in the asylum and immigration debate. The attacks, the murders of asylum seekers and immigrants in the early 90s are still very very aware in the public. And
much talked about in the last couple of weeks. Again, people have been looking back to that period and saying,
And then there was a series of Nazi terrorism in the last 1.5 decades that has been revealed in 2012 with the so-called NSU. And the reaction of...
Let me just explain for our viewers. A terrorist cell working out of East Germany who killed a large number of immigrants over a long period of time and went completely undiscovered by the authorities. We're not quite sure why. Did they have a blind eye to the racist motives? We don't know. But obviously that has been a major issue in this whole debate as well about immigration and integration.
And all this did change the German society, and there is a difference to the 1990s. And the difference is now that there is no more right-wing hegemony in the rural areas in East Germany. You now have both sides, even in small villages as Tröglitz. You have people who are completely xenophobic, who don't want foreigners to come in and to also openly oppose it. But you also have people, you have initiatives who say we want foreigners, we say welcome to immigrants, and that's a big difference. This has not been the case in the 1990s, and that's something new, and that's a good thing about.
So this is this transition in German society again. Mekonnen, you were about to...
So yeah, of course, there's a lot of paradoxy in the narrative and in the official politics. So while we see a clear change and policy shift in the official policy, like the citizenship law, and also the, like defining Germany as an immigrant country and the demographic shift, etc. There's a lot of issue into that and changing labor market. So there is a lot of truth in that, but at the same time, we have a growing diversity within the society, and the immigrants are no more silent. They voice racism. And that is one of the deep-rooted problems of Germany. There is a deep-rooted racism which has been shown not only in the official politics, but also, like, if you look into the job market, if you look into education, if you look into the career, if you look into the political representation, that is the gap what I'm talking about. We have the official political shift on the one side, but you have also a huge racism, discrimination in the daily life, but also in the institutions. But then again, you have also growing sentiments of fear and hate-mongering against refugees. So that's what you see on the one side. There is a growing empathy towards refugees. There are activists who go to the streets and also show a lot of sympathy. But also even in the politics, there is a shift that the politics believes today that Germany should take more share and also responsibility towards refugees. But then again, we shouldn't create more attraction to refugees. So it's like, how do you deal with who came in, treat them like more human, on the other side, protect the borders and building a fortress around Germany and Europe.
This is something we're going to have to talk about, because that's obviously a core issue in this debate as well. Let's just go back to Tröglitz, though, Judy. I don't want to create the wrong impression that it's important that in every part of the world, in all the parts of Germany, there's good, bad, and in between. But I think it would be naive not to talk about the fact that there are concentrations of far-right, anti-foreigner sentiment in Eastern Germany. That's an issue. Why? First of all, why are there these pockets? Why is there a problem that it's pronounced in other parts of Germany as well, but it's very pronounced in Eastern Germany? Why?
It's particularly pronounced in Eastern Germany. One, historically, it was a closed society, very much, until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Under the communist regime, it was literally closed. Foreigners, such as they were, the foreign guest workers, they were from Vietnam. Even then, they were living in quasi-ghettos. This is the first thing. Secondly, it's hard to play down the enormous sociological shifts that took place in East Germany during the 1990s. Apart from the fact that large swathes of industry was closed down, there was an enormous exodus of young people, particularly women. The women, as soon as they left school or as soon as they left college, they got out as fast as they could. The opportunities were in Western Germany or even outside Germany. And what you had then was actually an older generation getting older without a perspective, without jobs, and a younger generation of young men, not particularly well educated, and they had nowhere to go, and they became highly vulnerable. And so there's no doubt, and if you travel to some of the towns and villages in Brandenburg, either they are empty or they are with just very old men, very old people, and young men hanging around and just waiting to be, waiting for a cause. And so it's tragically, it's easy fodder, which the NPD, that's the far right-wing party from parts of Western Germany, have gone in to manipulate.
Yeah.
And some people also say the more population these areas lose, the more difficult it becomes for the remaining citizens to accept any change. And they are not happy that new people come in, but they rather regard them as something that makes their village even change more.
That's very interesting.
And or at least one interesting question then is, again, you've been to Tröglitz, and the idea now is that, as you pointed out, we were going to be sending 40 asylum seekers to Tröglitz. That isn't going to happen now in the immediate future, although some families have said they will begin to take people in. My question is, would you recommend asylum seekers to go and live in Tröglitz if that was their future as envisioned by German bureaucracy?
Actually, in Germany, asylum seekers cannot decide on their own where they want to live.
But I'm talking theoretically here.
Well, see, I would rather prefer to respond differently. It's the government who decides where they have to live for the first months during their asylum application is being checked. And the regional authorities made it very clear on Saturday that they were still going to send refugees to Tröglitz, that they were not going to accept that the situation was too bad and they cannot live there. And I think this was the correct decision, and it's the government's obligation and responsibility to protect them.
Mekonnen, would you say to Eritrean asylum seekers arriving in Germany, it's okay, you can go to Tröglitz, it's okay, you can go to Eastern Germany, no worries?
I wouldn't recommend. From the perspective of a strong democratic state, yes, we shouldn't give up, we shouldn't collapse in this situation, and like show strengths and also show like a principle step and approach towards like this brutality and hate which has been shown, and also the arson attack. From that perspective, we shouldn't give up. But from the perspective of a refugee, a single individual refugee, I wouldn't recommend to go to Tröglitz, because otherwise, they would have been instrumentalized for political reasons.
But they would be even instrumentalized if they are not there. What the Nazi Party wants are ethnically cleaned areas, so-called nationally liberated areas with no foreigners living in it. And once the government says, okay, it's too dangerous, we cannot send anybody there, they got what they wanted.
I understand, but from the individual perspective, like facing day-to-day racism, living with racist atmosphere, it shouldn't be the whole population of Tröglitz, but it's enough if there are few racists, who make life to hell.
Let's talk about the role in all this of the NPD. We've mentioned it, the far-right NPD party that has obviously had an instrumental role in what has been happening in Tröglitz. We don't know whether these are people from the village itself, which they are in part, or people from the area, or people from even further afield. I'd like to introduce a new voice to the discussion, somebody who's not here. Charlotte Knobloch, the former head of the Council of Jews here in Germany. I think she was in that post through to 2010 or so. And she's a woman who knows a thing or two about persecution, because she had to hide away from the Nazis as a child during the Nazi period here in Germany. And she came out at the weekend in response to the arson attack on the asylum shelter in Tröglitz. And she said the following: the NPD party, the party has to be banned as quickly as possible. Is she right?
No, I don't think so. One, if you ban a party, it goes underground and becomes invisible and insidious. Let them stand and let them be counted for and see them. Secondly, there is another factor that actually it's just not supporters of the MPD that are anti-racist and don't want this country to be open to foreigners. The so-called bourgeois respectable Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, is playing into this kind of populism as well. And actually, if you look at the results of the NPD in regional elections, it's got less and less, whereas support for
it's a waning force.
Indeed, and AfD is now, is what you said, breaking the taboo that you can actually talk about immigration and opening up Germany to foreigners. So it's very easy to say, yes, ban. When something is bad, ban it. But, I mean, they have been elected democratically, and it's visible. To put something into the underground now, I think it encourages even more people to slip down underground and make life even more difficult for foreigners.
Would you say, Mekonnen, a ban or not?
I totally understand your arguments, but I think, and my problem is that this party has been offering structures for extremist activities. So, you know, all the groups who has been banned or who don't have the legal structure to do their hate and brutal activities and so on, you know, like they are under this umbrella shadow of MPD. So MPD hasn't been only a party, only a political party, but also it's sheltering a lot more brutal and neo-Nazi and also all the skinhead groups who has been doing all these activities under the shelter of...
under the umbrella.
Of exactly MPD.
And so, they're getting public money.
And they get public money.
Yeah, because they are publicly represented. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked just a little while ago about continuities and discontinuities in recent German history in the last couple of decades. I'd like to just give you a couple more facts. I'd like to go back to the 1990s and mention some towns and cities in Germany that are very resonant. People think about what happened back then. Hoyerswerda, 1991, in eastern Germany. Nights of rioting around an asylum shelter, just similar to the kind of things we're seeing now. Mölln, 1992, 3 dead in an arson attack on 2 Turkish houses. Solingen, 1993, 5 dead in a similar attack. And then there was rioting in Rostock in 1992. Let's have a look at that before we talk about it.
August 1992. For 3 days, a racist mob held an apartment complex in Rostock in northern Germany under siege. The complex was home to a number of asylum seekers. The crowd, which at times numbered several hundred, attacked the building with rocks and Molotov cocktails. Around 3,000 people stood by while the riot raged, and many even cheered the right-wing mob on. Despite the intense violence, no one was killed in the multi-day assault. But elsewhere, not all victims were so lucky. Similar racially motivated attacks on refugee homes in Germany claimed several lives. Instead of placing the blame at the feet of attackers, many German politicians blamed the rising number of refugees for the violence. Several months after the attacks, the German parliament placed new restrictions on who could apply for asylum in Germany.
Christian, I'd like to ask you, to what extent Germany is the same place as it was then, and to what extent it is a different place?
I would say that concerning the immigration debate, Germany has changed a lot. This also reflects in the laws, in the immigration laws. In 1992, we had a record of asylum claims, several hundred thousand, and in that time, practically all parties decided to make it much more difficult to claim asylum in Germany. And the effect was that in the following 15 years, the number of refugees declined by about 95%. And this has changed. This has changed since 2007. The number of refugees is going up again. And after almost 2 decades of campaigning against very xenophobic asylum laws, the government has finally agreed to change some of these laws. So nowadays, refugees are getting almost the same social welfare money as Germans get it, which was not the case for many years. Restrictions on the freedom of movement have been loosened or eased. Restrictions on the possibility to work have been relieved a bit. And the question if it stays like that, because now we're in a situation that the effect of these changings, the refugees are benefiting from it, but at the same time the numbers are growing, and many people, not only from the right-wing AfD party but also from the Merkel party, are saying they are simply too many. We have to do something against it, and so to say, the recipe is to make the situation harder for refugees.
I mentioned at the beginning that you have written a book about Fortress Europe, as you put it in the book, and it's a term that's used a lot about refugee policy in Europe. Given what you're saying, to what extent is Germany part of that Fortress Europe or not part of that Fortress Europe?
Germany, as the biggest and most powerful state of the European Union, has the leading role in the asylum policy of the European Union. And what Germany did was it externalized its border protection to the countries on the border of the EU and beyond it. We have seen a huge development of externalization of border protection. Now the German borders are not only protected in the airport of Frankfurt or on the border to Poland, but on the Greek-Turkish border, on the Spanish-Moroccan border, in Lampedusa. We have an asylum architecture that makes it extremely difficult for asylum seekers to reach the center of Europe, to reach Germany. And still the immigration pressure is very high, and therefore a lot of people do come. They try to find a way around it, around all these instruments and institutions that have been erected to prevent refugees from arriving and to push the burden to countries like Italy, to countries like Greece, Spain, or Poland. It did work well for a while, but now after the Syrian crisis and after the increase of influx from Eritrea, many, and also from the Balkan states, many people arrive in Germany unless Germany, despite the fact that Germany has been doing a lot of effort to prevent this.
Okay, thanks.
But people also come because countries like Italy and so are just fed up by this Dublin regulations, and so they, you know, they don't stick to those regulations, but also they break actually European agreements like Dublin 2, Dublin 3, because they say, you know, like you are externalizing your border protection, but also not burden sharing with us.
Exactly.
So why should we keep? Why should we, you know, like adhere to those European regulations if you don't do that?
These are big, difficult moral questions. They have a moral dimension. This is the European dimension of the whole immigration debate. You have strong views on this.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. What is surprising, at least officially, the German government doesn't call for a revision of Dublin 2. Dublin 2, the Dublin 2 Convention essentially means that any refugee, the first country, EU country in which a refugee lands, that country is responsible for registering that person and looking at its asylum claims and so on. What happens is that the Greeks are fed up with this, the Italians are fed up with this. The Italians have been turning a blind eye because of the huge pressure of immigrants, but their own populist agenda as well. And the refugees get on the train, get up to Germany, go across to other countries as well. And what it shows is that really, this is really the time to scrap Dublin 2. It's unfair for countries like Greece and Italy to take the burden. They're the first to call, naturally, and to have a real system of burden sharing. But frankly, this debate about burden sharing has been going on for so long. It shows that there's an inherent unwillingness to actually deal with the refugee and asylum issue.
So what's going to happen on that debate? What is going to happen in the near future, in the medium term?
It's clear what's happened, not the medium term. We have the problem right now. There has to be burden sharing, and the German government and the Dutch government and actually all the 28 governments should really put away all the pressures of populist agendas and sit down and say, let us do burden sharing.
Okay.
I mean,
Actually, there has been a shift in the German position in the last half year, because for almost 1.5 decades, Germany has benefited from the regulation as it was, because the number of refugees coming in was lower as the number it would have to take according to its size. But in the third quarter of 2014, the number has risen above this line, and since then Germany is saying, oh, actually we might have to think about the new distribution scheme.
Indeed, and just one little point on this. Germany, when the Greek asylum system is just so appalling, even before the Greek crisis, how refugees were treated, put into prison, beaten up in the streets, police with connivance of the police. And when they arrived in Germany, and under the Dublin II, you're meant to send them back to Greece, Germany refused to, because the conditions are just so appalling. So it needs two things, in my view, a revision of Dublin II, but an entire serious overhaul of the asylum structures in these countries. I mean, clearly Greece cannot deal with this, but actually Greece can't use that as an excuse not to deal with it either.
Okay, point taken. Meanwhile, the situation is that the number of asylum seekers in Germany surged by about 60% last year. The authorities are saying they're expecting 300,000 asylum seekers here in Germany this year. Other people, credible voices, are saying maybe as many as 500,000, 600,000. My question is, and many people here in Germany will be asking this question, are all these people who are coming here and applying for asylum, becoming refugees, are they here to stay? Should they be here to stay?
Well, there are different regulations and conventions. They are not all coming on the basis of asylum law, the Article 16, but there is also the Geneva Convention, the Anti-Torture Convention, and the European Human Rights Convention, and so on. So there are a number of issues why people may be able to stay or not to stay. But also we should also tell that a big number of people also leave Germany for many reasons. Last year, around 257,000 former refugees and also asylum seekers left Germany. So we tell all the time the one story about incomers, and
it's
also...
a very interesting and important point, isn't it?
Exactly.
What can you tell us about these people who are leaving? Why are they leaving and where are they going to?
People leave for many reasons. You know, like they come here because they look for better perspectives, opportunities. Refugees are as people, as everybody, people like every other immigrant looking for themselves, for their families, children, and so on, to have better perspectives. And if they recognize that all these perspectives are not given, then they look for other opportunities in other countries like Sweden, UK, Canada,
Let me
US.
interrupt you then again, because if you go on the internet or you look at government publications, you can find all sorts of sites and pamphlets and information saying that Germany has a Willkommenskultur, a welcoming culture, an open arms policy, as it were. What you're saying appears to suggest that Germany doesn't have a welcoming culture.
Well, I mean, Germany, the official politics say itself, they don't have so far welcoming politics or policy. It's just, you know, like in process that politics in Germany say we need to have a welcoming centers, welcoming policy. If you look into the Ausländerbehörde, you know, like these immigration authorities, you know, it's horrible. It's that's why many people try to be citizens as soon as possible, so they get rid of all this very hardship and
Sure.
also.
But what about all the initiatives around Germany that we have seen? That there's been a lot of media coverage of church initiatives, for example. Tell me about those initiatives. I mean, people out there need to know about that.
Well, it's what Christian was saying earlier. In fact, there tends to be a consensus here that what is curious and very interesting is that while the number of refugees and asylum seekers has risen here in Germany, the number of civil society movements has risen as well. So the backlash isn't all in the hands of the NPD and the Alternative for Deutschland. And it is remarkable that younger people and older people, but particularly younger people, are going out on the streets and saying, no, this is our country, and we're going to make it welcome. And this civil society has been traditionally weak, actually, in Germany, leaving aside the big student movements of the late 1960s. But this is something very, very new and something very important. And along with the churches Trade unionists, that's another issue. But young people and older people have gone out to the streets and said, no, we don't want Germany to be closed, we want it to be open. And I think also because they're well informed, they can actually see what is happening in our southern and eastern neighbourhoods.
And we saw that during the last couple of months, I think, you know, like while we had on the one side all this Pegida movement and so on, and then on the other side there were counter movements, anti-racist movements in many cities. So the people outnumbered, actually.
Yeah, did the fact that there were demonstrations and counter-demonstrations, did that leave you feeling more or less optimistic about Germany and its future on the whole issue of integration and immigration?
Well, especially in bigger cities, you feel the diversified society where you have the feeling that you know, in these areas, in these regions, it can't happen that hate would be taking more space and power. But then, on the other side, we have regional selective situation like in eastern part of Germany, in the west, and that's something which disturbs me still. You know, we have like cities like in Dresden where things could be established, although there are also counter movements. Then you have western cities where all these racist movements has been very limited and also very marginalized. So yes, I would feel that if we have a broader movement of anti-racist movement all over Germany, but all in all, I think, especially in cities, the diversification of the society is more livable. So people feel that.
We're running out of time. Quickly, Christian, I'd like to just we began with you. We began with you in the actual little village town of Tröglitz, and I'd like to sort of take you back to Tröglitz and invite you to, in 30 seconds, to tell me what is the way to move forward in Tröglitz to avoid the kind of things that have been happening again in the future?
I would say that one very important thing is you have an institutional reflection on the civil society movement saying welcome to the refugees, which is very important and very good, but it's also necessary to do the necessary laws, to change the laws, to make it possible for people to come here, to arrive without going through the Mediterranean Sea, and you have to strengthen civil society movements on the ground in these little villages, not only in the big cities, but also in the rural areas.
Okay, Christian, thank you very much for that. Thank you both as well. Thank you all three for being here today. We've been discussing refugees in Germany, angst on both sides. I hope we've given you some food for thought. If you've enjoyed the show, come back next week. Bye-bye for now and tschüss.